Was Elvis involved with the mafia? The answer is yes, but not the traditional mafia that you might believe. Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, I give God all the praise, honor, and glory for that. Elvis Presley is back in the news again, and so many stories swirl around Elvis. Big question, was he involved with the mafia in any way? Because there were rumors that he was. And I will tell you this, you probably didn't know this, but there was an FBI investigation or file on him from the first time he got on stage until 5 years after his death. And I'm going to get into all of that. But before we do, very sad story. The reason he's back in the news, because his one and only daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, passed away just a few days ago at the young age of 54 from cardiac arrest. Very sad story. And you know, the whole Elvis Presley family story is just tragic. I mean, really. I mean, yes, he was a sensation, the king of rock and roll, and he had fame, he had power, he had money, he had everything. You know, he was known all over the world. He was an idol, but his story is really pretty sad. And his daughter's story, very sad. The whole legacy of his family is very sad. And while I was reading about Lisa Marie's death, I came across a story that I hadn't known before. I didn't know anything about it, and I thought it very interesting. I wanted to share it with all of you. But there was a writer who wrote a book a couple of years back, and she said that Elvis was a victim of his own DNA, and so was the whole family. Now, what did she mean by that? Apparently, Elvis's maternal grandparents were first cousins. They married, first cousins. And you know, that's not incest. I don't believe we can describe it as that. But you know, there could be genetic issues, health issues, when people that are so close in family marry and have children. And it seems that's what happened in Elvis's family's case. Let me get into that. He had a deficiency called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, a genetic disorder, and it's passed through generations, probably from his maternal grandparents. And as a result of that, very possibly, he died young, the age of 42, I believe in 1977. Everybody remembers that. That was around at that time. It was a big, big, big deal. King of rock and roll dies. He was a beloved figure. He really was. And his mom, Gladys, she died in her 40s, also I believe of a heart ailment. Elvis had a twin brother, I think his name was Jesse, who died at birth, was stillborn. A lot of his relatives died young, relatively young, in their 40s and early 50s, like Lisa Marie. And coincidentally, Lisa Marie had many of the same ailments that Elvis Presley had throughout his life. He had a lot of health complications, and Lisa Marie had pretty much the same. I think problem with the lungs, their liver, their kidneys. As a result of chronic pain that Elvis had, he was put on opioids. People said that he was a drug addict. Well, you know what? It's really not fair to call him that. He wasn't a heroin addict, from what I understand. He did get hooked on opiates, not too difficult. You know, when you're in pain and they prescribe that pain medication, those opioids are very addictive. And as a result of that, he started popping pills throughout his life. You saw some of the impact it had on him when his body swelled and, you know, he gained a lot of weight. It was very sad. And the autopsy at his death did confirm that he had this deficiency. He was at least a carrier of it. So it was very sad to know that, because if he was a victim of his own DNA, certainly he had no control over that. He was going to have those ailments, like it or not. You know, that's how it was back then. I don't think you see that too often today. You don't see family. You don't see people marrying as much at all today. But it was something that was fairly common way back when. I just wanted to mention that. Like I said, it was interesting to me, something that I didn't know. It's amazing how many of these people that are so beloved, have money, wealth, power, celebrity, how they have such tragic life stories. You know, I just heard recently that Jack Nicholson, brilliant actor, he's in his 80s, I think he's 88 years old. He hasn't left his house really in 2 years other than to see his kids. He won't go out. He's like a recluse. People are worried about him. He lives here in California. Robin Williams, same thing. You think he's beloved. You know, I talked about Twitch not too long ago, how he committed suicide. You know, you never know. And if you look into Hollywood and celebrity, you're going to see there were many tragic stories, many tragic stories. What does that show you? Power, wealth, celebrity, not the answer to everything, people. Look, at my turn, I don't want to get preachy, but, you know, God is the answer to a lot of these things, man. He gives you hope. And for me, a relationship with Jesus Christ has meant the world to me and a big difference in my life. I'm not going to get into that. It's not the appropriate time now, even though any time is appropriate to talk about the Lord. But I just wanted to mention that. It is sad, and of course we are, you know, we feel terrible about Lisa Marie. You know, she had a tragic life, lost her son. He committed suicide just a couple of years back. It destroyed her, from what I understand. She was married several times. She inherited $100 million, lost just about all of it. People swindled her out of money, and she was just, you know, not as responsible as she should be. Just terrible stories with a lot of these celebrities. It's very, very sad. So just understand that if you are at a certain place in your life, and you know, you got food on the table, you got your health, you got people around you that you love. You may not have a lot of money, you may not be able to sing and dance and act and have a position of power, but if you got your family, you got a roof over your head, and you got your health, man, that's a blessing, really. You know, it's a real blessing. But let's get into this. Was Elvis involved with the mafia? The answer is yes, but not the traditional mafia that you might believe. He was involved with the Memphis Mafia. Now that's a name that people gave those people that were close to him, that were his dear friends, that protected him, that were by his side, that he was comfortable with. Elvis, for obvious reasons, didn't trust a lot of people, and he shouldn't have. When you're in that position, everybody's trying to get close to you. Everybody's trying to get a piece of you. They want to get around you. They want to get your money. They want to get in the limelight. So he was very leery of people around him. So he stayed with a tight group, and they were known as the Memphis Mafia. Now, they didn't shoot and kill people like, you know, we believe the mafia did, my former associates, myself, but it was just a different thing. It was a name that they gave him, and he surrounded himself with those people. And he liked to be the godfather, from what I understand of that. Maybe he got it from the movie if he saw it early on. I don't know, but anyway, so let's dispel the other rumors. He was not involved in any way, shape, or form that I know of, that I ever heard of, that was ever been reported. There's no evidence to that fact. And if it were true, I think they would know about it, because what you don't know, or you may not know, is that Elvis was a subject of FBI scrutiny from the first day he got on stage in the 50s on the Ed Sullivan Show, right through 5 years after his death. For like 25, 30 years, he was the subject of FBI scrutiny. Now, why was that? Well, they called him a danger early on, believe it or not. Why? Because they said he had a negative influence on kids. They watched everything about him. They watched how his hair was long. They talked about his gyrations on the stage. Could you imagine this? They said his music was a threat to young people. Compare that to what we hear today with rap music, and just listen to some of Elvis's songs. How back then can they say that he was a threat to young people? Because he had them dress a certain way, because they liked the way he, you know, performed on stage. It was so ridiculous, but that was back in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, totally different, you know, culture than what we have today. I mean, think about how crazy that is. They reported on his dress. They reported on his love life. They reported his movements on stage. They reported all the crazies that were around him. I mean, this was a real thorough investigation. He was a subject of investigation for well over 20 some odd years. And you know, the ironic thing about this is Elvis was a patriot. You know, he went in the Army, right? He was in the Army, he was a patriot. And you know who his hero was? J. Edgar Hoover. He said that, quote, Hoover was the greatest living American. He loved Hoover. And yet Hoover was afraid to meet with him, would not meet with him. As a matter of fact, Elvis went to meet President Nixon at one point in time in Washington at the White House, and Hoover was conveniently out of town because Elvis wanted to meet him at the same time. He was conveniently out of town, wouldn't meet with him. Why? Because he had long hair, because he dressed crazy, because he sang differently than anybody did before. Just so crazy. How can you consider Elvis Presley a threat? But again, sign of the times. But interestingly enough, during that investigation, they found out Elvis was receiving death threats throughout his life, quite frequently too. Who knows why? People are crazy, guys in the limelight, death threats because they thought probably he had a negative influence on kids. One time he was scammed. He was a subject of, fraud attempts all the time. He was scammed on a deal. And these guys that scammed him might have had some mob connections. It had to do something with a plane that he had. They sold him the plane and then they financed the plane, for $1 million. They took the money, they left him holding the bag. I think he had to do some maintenance on the plane or something like that. Cost him a lot of money. They tried to scam him and they did get away with it from what I understand. They might have gotten locked up later on. I don't know. But he was the subject of, fraud attempts all the time. This is something that really riles me. In the Bible Belt, they were totally against him. These Christians that are so legalistic, so judgmental, man, it drives me crazy when I hear this. But there was a paper, I think it was in Wisconsin, they said that Elvis is a definite danger to the security of the United States. He was thought to be a sexual pervert and a drug addict. Now again, his drug addiction, I'm not going to get into it because I don't know too much, but I know a lot of his drug-related problems were a result of the opioids that he was put on because he was in chronic pain. But to call him a sexual pervert, they have no evidence of that. There was never anything out there that he was doing perverted things, but because he danced a certain way on stage, because he sang songs a certain way, believe me, people, those are not real Christians that are making those kind of rash judgments like that. The Lord says, judgment is mine. You may not like somebody's behavior, but you don't judge him so harshly as a result of that. Because you disagree with somebody or you don't like what they do or culturally it doesn't fit into what you're doing, you don't make such rash statements like that and judge him. And I don't like it when Christians do that. And there are so many legalistic Christians out there that make rash judgments, and it's a bad reflection on Christianity. But believe me, the sincere, real followers of Jesus, they don't act and talk like that. Trust me on that. A few other complaints. I know there was a communist party in Mexico, and they started a campaign to ban his music in Mexico City on all the radio stations. And they also started a campaign, they got a lot of young people involved in this, to burn his magazines, burn his recordings. There was another story out there that the Red Army in Germany was hatching a plot to assassinate Elvis. The FBI received anonymous tips that Elvis would be kidnapped in Vegas. I mean, all of these things were uncovered through the investigation. So I guess in some ways it was a good thing that they were watching him, because you had a lot of shady people trying to do things to him. This is the price of celebrity at times, and it's a shame because he seemed like a good guy. I mean, really, you didn't have any complaints about his character. He didn't rough people up. He wasn't an egotistical guy, it seemed, I know one thing, his dream really was to be a movie star. He loved being in the movies. He could never get that, solid role. They always put him in these kind of B-movie types. But he really did want to be an actor. That was his dream. Anyway, again, all of this, it ended tragically for him, at the young age of 42, 1977. And boy, I remember when Elvis died. It was huge. I mean, people crying and crying. So many people took it so hard. I mean, I know one thing, my wife, I think if she would have met Elvis first, I probably wouldn't be married to her because like every other young girl at the time, she was fascinated by Elvis. I'll put it that way. And so many young women were, and rightfully so. I mean, he gave joy to so many people. He was a brilliant entertainer. And, when I think of him and even, Michael Jackson, who had a little bit of a different story, but it's so sad when these celebrities who you believe have it all, just have such a tragic lifestyle. It's very, very difficult. So very, very sad. Our condolences go out to Lisa Marie's loved ones, the people that are closest to her. I know a lot of Hollywood that knew her are weighing in on that. A lot of her ex-husbands are weighing in on that. And it's a very sad thing. It really is. The whole family, the whole tragic story. So anyway, let's hope the next time we hear about Elvis in the news, for some reason, it's not, for a tragic purpose like this. So yeah, something that we're going to be doing right now is we get so many questions, people, and it's so hard to answer them. I explained this once before. We get thousands of questions across all social media platforms on a daily basis. very hard to get to them. And when I do answer one or two, the people that I don't answer get upset with me. So, darned if you do, darned if you don't. But here's what we decided to do. My team came back and said, look, let's take 2 questions and answer 2 questions, just about every opportunity that we can. So we're going to start that today. 2 questions, and hopefully we can do it on every video. I'm not going to name you. You know who asked the question, and hopefully it applies to a lot of you if you have the same question. Okay, first question. This is mob related, and people wanted to know if I had any dealing with Tommy Patera. The answer is no, I really didn't. Did I see him? Did I meet him? Did I know who he was? Yes. I'm a Colombo family guy. He was with another family, but, we tend to see each other quite a lot. Weddings, funerals. We were always kind of, when you were a guy as active as I was, you kind of meet a lot of people. And so I knew Tommy Patera, but I didn't have any dealings with him. We all know his reputation. I'm not going to get into that, but one of the rougher reputations out there. The second question was about Fat Tony Salerno. In the Netflix documentary, Fear City, something that I was in, the question was, why did they go after Fat Tony Salerno as the boss of the Genovese family when people thought that the real boss, and really he was the real boss, was Chin Gigante? Well, there was less on Chin than there was on Fat Tony. Remember, Chin played like he was crazy for 25, 30 years. He did not want to be in the limelight. He did not want anybody to know on the outside that he was the boss. People within the life, we knew who he really was. Fat Tony wasn't like the pseudo boss. I mean, he was the boss. He would consult with Chin, and I don't think he would do anything that Chin didn't agree with first. But Chin was the real boss, very much undercover, and so the FBI didn't have a lot on him at that point in time until later on when they did get him, and obviously on a RICO case, they put him away and he died in prison. So it was obvious, and I mean, for the right reasons, they did go after Fat Tony. As far as I knew, all the dealings that I had with respect to business were with Fat Tony when I had to do anything that concerned the Genovese family. So he was the boss. And, a lot of people say that he was make-believe, he wasn't really the boss. He was the boss. But again, Chin was the real power, and Tony listened to him closely, and I'm sure if Chin wanted something a certain way, Tony went along with it. So hopefully that answers your question. So that's it for today. Again, we're going to do 2 every video. We're going to do our best to do that. That's it for today. How do I always leave you? Same way, people. Be safe, be healthy. God bless every one of you. When you hear a story like this about Elvis and his daughter, you really should thank God for your blessings if your life is okay at this point in time. So be safe, be healthy. God bless. See you next time.